Your 30s are supposed to be when everything clicks financially. At least that's what everyone tells you. But here's what nobody mentions until you're already knee-deep in the decade. Your 30s are actually when you discover that almost everything you believed about building wealth was completely wrong. You hit 30 thinking you've got time to figure it out, and then you blink and you're 35, realizing you've been running on a treadmill while everyone else found the escalator. The worst part? The people who figured it out aren't necessarily smarter than you. They just knew something you didn't. Let me show you what changed everything for me, because I spent the first half of my 30s doing exactly what you're not supposed to do. And the numbers don't lie about how much that mistake actually costs. Most people enter their 30s with a specific financial narrative playing in their heads. You've survived your 20s, probably have some career momentum, maybe you're earning decent money for the first time in your life. The plan seems obvious. Keep climbing the corporate ladder, save what you can, and eventually everything works out. Except there's a massive problem with this approach that becomes brutally clear around year 33. Your 20s were about building income. Your 30s are about building assets. And if you don't understand the difference between those two things, you're going to waste the most important wealth-building decade of your entire life. Here's the trap that catches almost everyone. You finally start making good money in your 30s, let's say you break into six figures, or you get that promotion you've been chasing. And what happens? Your lifestyle expands to match it. Bigger apartment, nicer car, better restaurants, more expensive hobbies. You're still saving money, maybe even maxing out your retirement account, but you're not actually building wealth at the rate you should be. The data on this is staggering. According to recent Federal Reserve statistics, the median net worth for people aged 30 to 34 is roughly $60,000. For 35 to 39, it jumps to about $120,000. That sounds like progress until you realize what that actually means. Most people are only adding about $60,000 to their net worth across 5 years of their peak earning potential. That's $12,000 per year. Meanwhile, their income probably increased by $30,000 or $40,000 during that same period. Where did the difference go? It evaporated into lifestyle inflation disguised as success. But there's a group of people in their 30s who are playing a completely different game, and their numbers tell a radically different story. These aren't trust fund babies or lottery winners. They're people who figured out what your 30s are actually for, and they're building wealth at 5 to 10 times the rate of everyone else their age. The difference comes down to understanding one crucial concept that nobody teaches you. Your 30s are when you stop optimizing for income and start optimizing for net worth growth. These are not the same thing, and confusing them is probably the most expensive mistake you can make this decade. Think about how you approached money in your 20s. You wanted to earn more, build your resume, gain experience. Income was the scoreboard. That made sense because you were starting from zero and you needed cash flow to survive. But your 30s operate under completely different mathematics. Every dollar you earn in your 30s has roughly 25 to 30 years to compound before traditional retirement age. That same dollar earned in your 40s has 15 to 20 years. The difference isn't linear, it's exponential. A dollar invested at age 32, assuming reasonable market returns, will be worth roughly 5 times more at retirement than a dollar invested at age 42. Not 50% more, 500% more. This is why your 30s aren't just important, they're irreplaceable. You cannot make up for a wasted decade in your 30s by working harder in your 40s. The math doesn't work. The compound interest you lose is gone forever. So what does optimizing for net worth actually look like? It starts with a complete reframe of how you think about money coming in versus money staying invested. Most people in their 30s are still thinking like they're in their 20s. Earn more, spend some, save some, repeat. But the people who actually build substantial wealth in this decade are asking completely different questions. They're not asking, how can I earn more money? They're asking, how can I convert my income into assets that generate their own returns? They're not focused on salary negotiations. They're focused on investment allocation. They're not celebrating the raise, they're celebrating the increase in their savings rate. And here's where it gets interesting, because this shift in thinking reveals something that most people never realize until it's too late. The career move that increases your income by $20,000 might actually be worse for your wealth building than the career move that increases your income by $10,000, but gives you more time to focus on investment strategy. The impressive job title that requires 70-hour weeks might build your resume, but destroy your net worth compared to the less prestigious role that gives you mental energy to optimize your financial life. Your 30s force you to choose between looking successful and being successful. And most people choose wrong because they're still optimizing for the metrics that mattered in their 20s. I learned this the hard way. I spent ages 30 to 33 chasing income increases and job titles, and my net worth barely moved. Then something shifted. I started treating my investment strategy with the same intensity I'd been treating my career, and everything changed. The income I was earning finally started converting into actual wealth instead of just funding a more expensive lifestyle. The mechanics of how this works are simpler than you'd think, but they require you to break some rules that feel almost sacred. First, you need to understand that the traditional retirement advice you've been hearing is built for a world that doesn't exist anymore. Max out your 401k. Get the employer match. Buy index funds. Hold for 30 years. That playbook worked beautifully if you started your career in 1985 and retired in 2015. But the mathematics have fundamentally changed, and almost nobody has updated their strategy to match the new reality. The average 401k balance for someone in their 30s is around $45,000. Think about that number for a second. 45,000. That's what a decade of following conventional wisdom gets you. Meanwhile, the people who are actually building serious wealth in their 30s have net worths exceeding $500,000, sometimes crossing into seven figures. Same age bracket. Completely different outcomes. The difference isn't luck or inheritance or some secret investment strategy. It's understanding that your 30s operate on completely different rules than your 20s, and most people never figure this out until their 40s, when it's significantly harder to course correct. Your 20s were about building income. Your 30s are about converting that income into self-replicating assets. That conversion rate is everything. You could earn $300,000 this year, but if your conversion rate is terrible, you'll end the year with maybe $20,000 in actual wealth accumulation. Meanwhile, someone earning half your income with an optimized conversion rate might add $60,000 to their net worth. This sounds impossible until you see how it actually works. The first thing you need to kill is lifestyle inflation, not reduce it. Kill it entirely. Every time your income increases, your default programming wants to increase your spending to match. New apartment, better car, nicer restaurants, upgraded everything. This is the wealth destruction mechanism that keeps high earners perpetually broke. The person making $200,000 who spends $190,000 is in a worse position than the person making $80,000 who spends $50,000. The second person is building wealth. The first person is just funding a more expensive version of being broke. But here's what nobody tells you about fighting lifestyle inflation. Willpower doesn't work. Budgets don't work. Telling yourself to just spend less is like telling yourself to just be happier. You need a system that makes wealth accumulation automatic and makes excessive spending actually difficult. The strategy is simple, but most people never implement it. The moment your paycheck hits your account, automatically move your target savings rate into investment accounts before you have a chance to spend it. Not at the end of the month, not when you remember. Immediately. Treat your savings rate like a bill that gets paid first and live on whatever remains. Most people have this backwards. They pay all their bills, spend on whatever they want, then try to save what's left over. There's never anything left over. Your expenses will always expand to consume available resources. This is Parkinson's law applied to personal finance, and it's why people making six figures often have less saved than people making $60,000. The high earner sees money in their account and feels rich. The disciplined earner never sees the money because it's already invested. Now, your specific savings rate depends on your situation, but the people building serious wealth in their 30s are typically saving 40 to 60% of their gross income. That sounds insane until you realize what it actually requires. It doesn't mean living like a broke college student. It means being ruthlessly intentional about what you spend money on and completely eliminating everything else. The expensive car you don't actually care about. The oversized apartment you chose to impress people. The restaurants you visit out of habit rather than genuine enjoyment. Cut all of it, not because you can't afford it, but because it's standing between you and actual wealth. This is where people push back hard. They've been sold this idea that their 30s are supposed to be about enjoying the money they're finally earning after struggling through their 20s. You're supposed to upgrade your lifestyle. You've earned it. This is exactly the psychological trap that keeps people on the hamster wheel forever. You work hard to earn money so you can spend money, so you need to keep working hard to earn more money. It never ends. The cycle just gets more expensive. What actually happens when you optimize for net worth instead of lifestyle? You reach a point, usually within 5 to 7 years, where your investment returns start generating more wealth annually than your active saving. Your money starts working harder than you do. This is the inflection point that separates people who retire wealthy from people who work until they're 70. Most people never reach it because they're too busy funding an expensive lifestyle that doesn't actually make them happier. Let me show you the mathematics that prove this. If you're 32 years old, earning $100,000 annually, and you save 50% of your gross income, that's $50,000 per year going into investments. Assuming reasonable market returns around 8%, by age 40 you'll have roughly $540,000. Your investments are now generating about $43,000 annually in returns. You're still saving $50,000 from your income, but your money is adding another $43,000 on its own. You've essentially given yourself a $43,000 raise that requires zero additional work. Most of your peers who spent the last 8 years upgrading their lifestyles have maybe $100,000 saved. Their investments generate around $8,000 annually. Same age, same starting income, completely different financial realities. One person is 7 years away from potential financial independence. The other person is still completely dependent on their paycheck and will be for decades. This gap only widens over time because of how compound growth actually works. The person with $540,000 isn't just ahead by the dollar amount difference. They're ahead by the exponential acceleration that comes from having a larger base to compound from. Their investments will double faster, generate more passive income, and create opportunities that simply don't exist for people with smaller portfolios. Now let's address the objection running through your head right now. Saving 50% of your income sounds completely unrealistic if you're barely making it on what you earn. You've got student loans, rent in an expensive city, maybe a car payment. How exactly are you supposed to cut your spending in half? First, understand that most people asking this question are dramatically overestimating their fixed costs and underestimating their discretionary spending. When I say discretionary, I'm not talking about obvious luxuries. I'm talking about the 1,000 small decisions you make every week that feel necessary but absolutely aren't. The truth is brutal but liberating. Almost everything you spend money on beyond basic shelter, food, and transportation is optional. You've just convinced yourself it isn't. That gym membership you use twice a month, optional. The streaming services you cycle through looking for something to watch, optional. The convenience of ordering delivery instead of cooking, optional. The upgraded phone plan with unlimited everything, optional. Track every dollar you spend for 1 month. Not approximately, not rounded up, every single transaction. What you'll discover is terrifying. 30 to 40% of your spending happens almost unconsciously on things you wouldn't even remember buying if you didn't have the receipt. This isn't about deprivation, it's about consciousness. When you start questioning every purchase, you realize how much money flows out of your life funding things that add zero value. That realization alone can free up 15 to 20% of your income without touching anything that actually matters to your quality of life. But here's where it gets interesting. The real wealth hack isn't cutting expenses, it's increasing income while keeping expenses flat. Most people do the opposite. They get a raise and immediately upgrade their apartment or buy a nicer car. The lifestyle inflation happens automatically. What if you did something radical instead? What if every raise, every bonus, every additional dollar you earned went straight into investments before you had a chance to adjust your lifestyle around it? You're living fine on your current income. That's already proven. So when you get a $10,000 raise, you don't need that money for survival. You're already surviving. That entire $10,000 can accelerate your path to wealth without sacrificing anything. This is how people go from zero to millionaire in their 30s. Not through genius stock picks or lucky breaks. Through the boring math of earning more while spending the same. Your income has potential to grow exponentially through career development, side businesses, or skill acquisition. Your expenses only need to grow with actual inflation, which historically runs about 3% annually. That gap between income growth and expense growth becomes your wealth-building engine. Most people never create this gap. Their expenses track their income perfectly, sometimes exceeding it. They're always spending slightly more than they make, regardless of how much they make. The discipline required to break this pattern separates people who build wealth from people who just earn money. Now let's talk about the psychological shift that makes this possible. You need to fundamentally change how you think about purchases. Most people use a simple calculation. Can I afford this? If the answer is yes, they buy it. This is exactly backwards. The right question isn't whether you can afford something. The right question is whether buying this thing moves you closer to or further from financial independence. Every purchase is a trade-off. You're trading future freedom for present consumption. Sometimes that trade makes perfect sense. You need reliable transportation. You need nutritious food. You need a safe place to live. But the designer handbag, the expensive watch, the luxury vacation to impress your social media followers, those purchases aren't buying happiness, they're buying status. And status is the most expensive thing you can purchase because it requires constant maintenance and escalation. You know what's actually high status? Having enough money that you never think about money. That's real wealth. The guy driving the 10-year-old Toyota but sitting on $2 million in investments is wealthier than the guy leasing a BMW with $15,000 in his checking account. One of them is free, the other is trapped. Here's the framework that changes everything. Before making any purchase over $100, calculate how many hours of freedom it costs. If you save $50,000 per year and your goal is $1 million for financial independence, every $50,000 you save buys you 1 year of freedom. That means every $50 you spend costs you approximately 1 day of your life that you'll have to work instead of being free. Suddenly, that $200 dinner isn't just $200. It's 4 days of your life. That $1,000 gadget you don't really need, 20 days of freedom you're trading away. When you start thinking this way, spending money becomes painful in a productive way. Not because you can't afford things, but because you're viscerally aware of what you're actually trading. This mental shift is worth more than any investment strategy or tax optimization technique. It's the difference between people who accumulate wealth and people who just churn money through their bank accounts. The most powerful wealth-building tool isn't compound interest or tax optimization or asset allocation. It's identity. You need to become someone who doesn't spend money on stupid things, not through willpower or discipline or constant self-denial, through genuine disinterest in consumption as a lifestyle. Most people think wealthy individuals have incredible self-control, resisting temptation every day. That's completely wrong. Wealthy people aren't resisting anything. They've genuinely stopped wanting the things that broke people think they want. The desire itself has disappeared. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. You can't just decide tomorrow that you don't care about nice cars or designer clothes or impressing strangers. But you can start rewiring your reward system by celebrating different victories. Instead of celebrating a promotion with an expensive dinner, celebrate by calculating how much faster you'll hit your savings goal with the raise. Instead of rewarding yourself for hard work with purchases, reward yourself by watching your net worth climb. Your brain will adapt. The dopamine hit from seeing your investment account grow will eventually exceed the dopamine hit from buying things. Once that flip happens, building wealth becomes effortless. You're not fighting your nature anymore. Your nature is working for you. Consider what happens when you reach that $10,000 milestone. You're not the same person who started saving. You've developed patience, discipline, and the ability to delay gratification. These traits compound just like money does. The person who can save their first $10,000 can save their second $10,000 faster because the habits are already built. The person who can save $100,000 can save their next $100,000 in half the time. Wealth building accelerates not just because of compound returns, but because you become better at it. Here's something that separates people who actually achieve financial independence from people who just talk about it. They obsess over their savings rate, not their investment returns. Your savings rate is the percentage of your after-tax income that you actually keep and invest. Someone earning $50,000 who saves 30% is building wealth faster than someone earning $200,000 who saves 5%. Do the math. $50,000 at 30% equals $15,000 saved annually. $200,000 at 5% equals $10,000 saved annually. The person earning less is accumulating more wealth. This is why high earners often retire broke while modest earners sometimes retire wealthy. It's never about how much you make. It's always about how much you keep. The optimal savings rate depends on how quickly you want financial independence. Save 10% and you'll work for about 50 years before you can retire. Save 25% and you'll work for about 30 years. Save 50% and you'll work for about 17 years. Save 75% and you'll work for about 7 years. These numbers assume average market returns and a 4% withdrawal rate in retirement. The math is simple, but the implications are profound. Your savings rate literally determines how many years of your life you'll spend working. Every percentage point increase in your savings rate buys you freedom measured in months or years. This is why people who understand this obsess over reducing expenses. Not because they're cheap or miserable, but because they're doing the math and realizing that every recurring expense represents permanent enslavement. That $300 monthly car payment isn't just $300. Over a working career, it's the difference between retiring at 55 versus retiring at 58. That's 3 extra years of freedom you're trading for a nicer car. When you frame purchases this way, the decisions become obvious. You start seeing everything in terms of freedom cost rather than dollar cost. A $20 lunch isn't $20. It's 20 minutes of your life you'll need to work. A $500 gadget isn't $500. It's a week of freedom you're giving up. This mental framework doesn't make you miserable, it makes you intentional. You still spend money on things that genuinely improve your life. But you stop spending money on things that provide temporary satisfaction, followed by buyer's remorse. The compound effect of thousands of small decisions made with this framework transforms your financial trajectory completely. Most people never think this way because they've been conditioned to believe that success means earning more money. Society celebrates the promotion, the raise, the six-figure salary. Nobody celebrates the person who lives on $40,000 while earning $80,000 and banks the difference. But that person is winning. They're buying their freedom while everyone else is buying status. They're thinking in decades while everyone else is thinking in pay periods. They're building the foundation for a life where work becomes optional while everyone else is trapped in jobs they tolerate because they need the paycheck to fund lifestyles they don't even enjoy. Financial independence isn't about being rich. It's about being free. Free to say no to things that don't serve you. Free to pursue work that matters regardless of compensation. Free to spend your time according to your values rather than your bank account balance. That freedom is available to almost anyone willing to prioritize it over consumption. The $10,000 sitting in your account represents more than emergency protection or investment capital. It represents proof that you can control your financial destiny. It demonstrates that you're capable of delaying gratification and thinking long-term. It confirms that you're becoming someone different than who you were. That transformation is what makes everything else possible. Your 30s aren't a dress rehearsal. They're the main event. The decisions you make right now about money will echo through the rest of your life with a volume that's impossible to ignore later. Most people realize this around 38 or 39 when they finally stop and calculate where they actually stand. They've been earning good money for years, maybe even great money, but their net worth doesn't reflect it. They've been running hard but going nowhere. The treadmill kept them busy while time did what time does, ran out. You can avoid that, not through some complex strategy or secret knowledge, through simple awareness of what this decade actually is. Your 30s are when you stop performing wealth and start building it, when you stop optimizing for appearances and start optimizing for freedom. When you realize that the person driving the modest car but sitting on a 7-figure portfolio is living in a completely different reality than the person leasing luxury vehicles while carrying 6 figures of debt. The gap between those two people isn't intelligence or luck or inheritance. It's understanding that wealth is measured in freedom, not possessions. It's recognizing that every dollar you spend is a choice between temporary satisfaction and permanent independence. It's accepting that building real wealth requires you to live differently than most people around you, and being completely fine with that. Your $10,000 isn't the finish line. It's proof you understand the game. What you do with that understanding over the next several years will determine whether you spend your 40s building on a solid foundation or desperately trying to make up for lost time. The math is simple. The execution is hard. But the people who get it right don't regret a single sacrifice they made. They only regret they didn't start sooner.